Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, 10-year-old best friends, strolled down the road to a neighborhood sports center's vending machine in early August 2002. Then Holly and Jessica vanished. Less than 2 weeks later, the desperate hunt for the girls ended in tragedy. When the truth was exposed, it was apparent that the killer had been present all along. Welcome back to Cold Case Diaries, where we shed light on mysterious cases from around the world. Today, we'll dig into the case of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman and give you an insight into what was then the largest manhunt in the UK. But first, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and click the bell button below as it inspires us to create more intriguing content for you. So without further ado, let's get started on our first mystery today. Prior to the 2002 events, Soham, a small market town near the borders of Suffolk and Cambridgeshire, was best described as unremarkable. In Soham, nothing really ever happened. With a population of less than 10,000 people and a rural countryside setting, it's clear to see why Soham is appealing. This undoubtedly attracted the interest of the Wells and Chapman families. Holly Marie Wells, the daughter of Kevin and Nicola Wells, was born on October 4, 1991. Oliver, her older brother, was her only sibling. The Wells family lived down the road from the Chapmans. Sharon and Leslie Chapman and their 3 children, Rebecca, Alison, and Jessica, made up their family. Jessica was born on the 1st of September 1991. She and Holly were the best of friends. They grew inseparable after their first meeting at nursery. The girls then attended St. Andrew's Primary School together. Holly was the more reserved of the two, whereas Jessica was the more outgoing. That could be why they got along so well. Holly and Jessica complemented one another. Despite their differences, the girls had many interests in common. They were big fans of sports, especially football. Both were supposed to compete in a junior superstar tournament at the Ross Piers Sports Centre between the 6th and 8th of August. A total of 90 children were scheduled to compete in swimming, football, and cycling events. But Holly and Jessica never made the competition, and due to the events of the previous weekend, the entire event was cancelled. Holly went shopping with her mother and friend Natalie on Saturday, August 3rd. Holly was overjoyed when her mother brought her a new pair of flare trousers. Natalie spent the night and the next morning at Holly's house. Jessica left her home on Brook Street at 11:45 a.m. on Sunday, August 4, 2002, for the short walk to Holly's house. It would be the first time the girls had seen each other in 2 weeks, as Jessica had been on vacation in Menorca for 2 weeks. Jessica had purchased a necklace with a pendant letter H for Holly while she was away, and she was undoubtedly excited to give the gift to her best friend. Holly resided in Red House Gardens, which was just around the corner from the Chapmans. When Jessica came, she, Holly, and Natalie spent around 30 minutes playing computer games and listening to music. Natalie then left, leaving Jessica and Holly to catch up in Holly's room. Jessica was enjoying spending time with her closest friend after their time apart, so she called her parents and asked if she could have lunch at the Wells. They agreed, and Holly and Jessica ate some egg mayonnaise sandwiches before continuing to play. Even after spending more time with Holly, Jessica felt like she hadn't done so nearly enough. She then made another call to her parents, this time requesting to join the family for dinner. Sharon assured Jessica that it wasn't a problem, but she should let her know when she was ready to return home so her dad could pick her up. Holly and Jessica had changed into Manchester United football shirts by 3:15 p.m. One belonged to Holly and the other to her brother. Manchester United was their favourite team, and David Beckham was their favourite player. He was their idol. Holly's mother took a picture of the girls in their matching clothes at 5:04 p.m. They then sat down to dine with the other guests who had come over for a BBQ. The girls returned to Holly's room around 6:10 p.m. They left the house without notifying anyone 5 minutes later. Someone who knew the girls noticed them crossing Sand Street around 6:30 p.m. Nicola Wells went to her daughter's room at 8 p.m., about 2 hours after dinner, to call the girls to say goodbye to the guests. She was shocked to see that neither Holly nor Jessica was in the room when she peered through the door. She got extremely concerned right away and called Kevin to help her search the house. When they realized the girls weren't in the house, they walked up and down the street to see if they could find them. Holly's curfew was 8:30 p.m., so Nicola wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt until then. Nicola contacted Jessica's mother when the girls were still not home. Sharon was shocked. The Chapmans were also concerned about their daughter's absence. The families began looking for the girls before realizing anything was seriously wrong. The authorities were notified, and Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were reported missing at 9:55 p.m. Cambridgeshire police launched a massive search for the missing 10-year-olds, with hundreds of officers assigned to the case. House-to-house inquiries were done across the town of Soham in search of any information about Holly and Jessica's whereabouts. This was unusual for both of them. This was a small, peaceful town, and Holly and Jessica were aware of the importance of being careful of strangers and never violated their curfews. Their parents had trained them from a young age not to talk to strangers. The head teacher of St. Andrew's Primary School shared a similar viewpoint when she told reporters that we have impressed upon the children from a young age the possible danger from strangers. Hundreds of volunteers assisted in the hunt as Cambridgeshire police issued a photograph of the girls in their Manchester United shirts taken just hours earlier. There were physical descriptions of Holly and Jessica with this picture. The girls' parents attended a press conference on Monday, August 5th, to ask for help in getting their daughters home. Suffolk and Essex County Police were called to assist Cambridgeshire Police in their investigation. They worked all night but couldn't locate Jessica or Holly. David Beckham, a star for Manchester United, made a heartfelt plea for the girls to return home on August 6th. The Cambridgeshire Police had been calling for information and witnesses to come forward rather than releasing any theories as to what they thought happened to the girls until Wednesday, the third day since they had gone missing. That day, they revealed that abduction was starting to look like a real possibility. Later that night, 450 people from Soham came together to hold a vigil for the girls. In connection with the disappearance, every registered sex offender in Cambridgeshire and neighbouring Lincolnshire was questioned. Because the police were now convinced that a kidnapping was a distinct possibility, this was the most sensible course of action. They didn't stop there either, with over 200 more sex offenders being questioned regarding the disappearance, regardless of their distance from Soham. Mark Tuck called in a lead, reporting he saw the girls going down Sand Street in Soham town centre around 6:30 p.m. on August 4th. He recognized the missing girls right away because their bright red shirts caught his eye as he drove by. Mark even told his wife, Lucy, who was in the car, "Look, there are two little Beckhams over there." Karen Greenwood saw them strolling arm in arm down College Road 2 minutes later. The final known sighting of Holly and Jessica occurred along the same route. Ian Huntley, a 28-year-old school caretaker, told authorities on August 5th that he had briefly spoken to the girls on his doorstep. Huntley, who had been living in Soham for a year, was dating one of Holly and Jessica's teachers, Maxine Carr. Huntley was outside his house washing his dog, Sadie, when the girls approached. and asked if Maxine's application to work full-time at their school had been accepted. Huntley informed them that it had not been, to which Jessica and Holly replied, "Tell Maxine we're sorry." The girls then walked along College Street towards a bridge that went to Clay Street. This was the last confirmed sighting. So who were Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr? Ian Kevin Huntley was born on January 31st, 1974, to Linda and Kevin Huntley in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. He was the elder of the two young brothers. Huntley's parents were staying with Linda's parents at the time he was born. The Huntleys settled in Immingham after the birth of their second child, Wayne, in 1975. Huntley was a shy kid who adored his mother. Huntley was a mediocre student. Many of his peers thought he was weird, so he never had many close friends. Huntley, a young boy, was bullied to the point where his already mediocre academic performance plummeted. When he was 13, he transferred to a new school, but the bullying continued. Huntley decided against completing his studies after high school and instead entered the workforce immediately. He held a series of low-paying jobs from 1990 to 1996. None of them were permanent positions for him. In June of 1994, Huntley began dating Claire Even, then 18 years old, whom he had met at the Heinz plant where he was employed. 2 months into dating, Huntley popped the question. They tied the knot on January 28, 1995, at the Grimsby Register office. Huntley's suspicious behavior in the beginning contributed to the rapid downfall of their marriage. Because of his explosive temper and violent nature, Claire decided to leave him. Huntley, though, attempted to fabricate an illness to keep Clary around. Ultimately, this failed, and the two broke up. Soon after, Claire started dating Wayne, Huntley's sibling. Huntley first met Maxine Carr, then 22 years old, in a Grimsby pub in February 1999. On February 16, 1977, Maxine Ann Capp was born to Shirley and Alfred Capp in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. She was one of 2 daughters. Maxine experienced a rough upbringing as a result of her parents' constant fighting. Shirley divorced her husband in 1979 after a heated dispute. The family eventually settled in Keelby, a tiny town in Lincolnshire. Alfred's relationship with his daughters was characterized by a lack of financial support and limited contact. Shirley had her parents help her raise her daughters, but they struggled financially throughout their upbringing. Maxine was an introverted kid who didn't have many friends. Maxine had always wanted to be a teacher, but she had never been very successful in school. Maxine dropped out of high school in 1993 to join her mother at a local fish processing plant. After that, Maxine went to school for general care at the Grimsby Institute of Further and Higher Education. In 1996, she completed her education and became a graduate. Maxine continued to work odd jobs, but her co-workers quickly realized that she was cold and uninterested. She did talk a lot about wanting to teach. Maxine adopted the surname Benson for a while. Later in life, maybe in an effort to separate herself from her father, she changed her last name to Carr. Huntley and Maxine moved in together just 4 weeks after their first date. Their relationship was rocky at best. Huntley was very controlling and aggressive towards Maxine, both emotionally and psychically. As a result, Maxine would frequently go spend time with her mum, and Huntley would have to convince her to return. A school caretaker position in Soham became known to Huntley in the middle of 2001. He applied for the position and was successful. He started working there in November 2001. The media's attention to the case grew enormously as the search went on. Reporters swarmed the normally tranquil town of Soham. Among the reporters who were involved in the scandal was Jeremy Thompson of Sky News. Using Huntley's description, Jeremy planned to retrace the girls' last known movements. In the early stages of the investigation, Jeremy spoke with Ian Huntley. Huntley was happy to hear from him, and he expressed worry about the girls. Even though their time together was brief, Huntley assured Jeremy that the girls were as happy as Larry. It turned out that the police didn't accept Huntley for his word. Huntley's house was searched by a single police officer on August 5th, the same day he mentioned seeing the girls. Nothing suspicious was discovered. However, the police officer did notice a large amount of laundry drying on the line despite the rain. It was also evident that a substantial amount of cleaning had been done throughout the house. To clarify, Huntley said, "Excuse the dining room. We had a flood." The officer noted that Huntley appeared agitated and recorded his observations that day. They investigated him thoroughly to see if he could produce an alibi for his whereabouts on August 4th. Maxine Carr, Huntley's girlfriend, was interviewed by police and gave him a good alibi. On the evening of August 4th, she was with him and taking a bath when Huntley spoke to the girls. Although this provided Huntley with a plausible alibi, he was not yet eliminated as a suspect. Huntley found himself in the role of the unofficial Soham spokesperson in the days following the disappearance. He gave interviews to several news outlets where he described the widespread shock in the little town. Huntley also said he wished he could change the events of that day by rewinding time. Perhaps things would have turned out differently in the long run if he had spent just a little more time talking to them or asked them where they were going. Maxine also spoke to reporters in the second week after the girls went missing. She echoed Huntley's statement about seeing the children on his porch while she was in the bath. "I only wish we'd asked where they were going. If only we'd known, then what we know now, then we may have stopped them or taken action." Maxine regarded Holly as the more feminine of the two, while Jessica was the tomboy. She had previously mocked Jessica for being the only one of her friends who never wore a skirt. Jessica expressed her love for Maxine by saying she would gladly wear a dress if she were one of Maxine's bridesmaids. Maxine finished the interview by showing the reporter a card Holly had given her on the last day of school. "She was just lovely, really lovely," Maxine commented. "Did you notice the last bit?" "She was just lovely," Maxine said. Why was she using the past tense in reference to Holly? This caught the interest of the reporters, who forwarded the bizarre remark to the investigators. While this does not necessarily suggest she was guilty of anything, it was worth noting. Investigators noticed Huntley was looking worse for wear the same week. He'd lost a lot of weight and didn't seem to have slept in days. To raise suspicions, he told an officer, "You think I did it? I was the last one to see them," he said before breaking down in tears. He was prescribed antidepressants on August 13th. On August 17th, 48-year-old gamekeeper Keith Pryor made a horrifying discovery, bringing the desperate hunt for Holly and Jessica to a devastating end. Keith had detected an awful odor some days before and decided to investigate it when he returned with friends a few days later. Keith discovered two dead bodies in a deep drainage ditch while walking along the overgrown Vagee with his friend Adrian Lawrence. Adrian called back to his girlfriend, Helen Sawyer, and told her not to come any closer as he saw what Keith had seen. The men called the police, who arrived quickly in Suffolk, more than 10 miles away from Soham. The bodies showed advanced decay and had been partially burned. Despite being unable to clearly identify the victims, authorities believed they had found Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman's bodies. They died somewhere else before being brought to the location. Cambridgeshire Deputy Chief Constable Keith Hodder informed the public on August 18th that the remains of the two girls had been discovered saying that they were as certain as they possibly could be. 3 days later, DNA verified their suspicions. Over 2,000 people attended Holly and Jessica's public mourning service at Ely Cathedral. Reverend Tim Alban Jones officiated. Wouldn't a change in how we treat each other be the best and most lasting memorial to these two lovely young girls? Today's service is a small milestone in our shared journey of grief and sadness. It is our desire that we can draw a line under one period of our grief and begin to look forward, he said. Football clubs around England observed a minute of silence before their games to remember the two football-crazed girls whose lives had been cut short. Police first questioned Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr on August 16th, 12 days after they went missing. The interrogation lasted 7 hours, and neither of them requested legal representation during the ordeal. Prior to questioning, investigators had noticed some unusual behavior in Huntley. On one occasion, he leaned against an officer's car door and inquired as to how long DNA lasts before degrading. Around this time, 3 vertical scrapes were noticed going down his cheek. Huntley blamed it on an altercation with his dog. The police had already discovered a few interesting facts by the time Huntley and Maxine were being questioned. Maxine had been seen in Grimsby while claiming she was with Huntley on August 4th, giving him an alibi. Maxine was spotted in the town centre the night the girls went missing. Grimsby is more than 100 miles from Soham, where Maxine previously resided. Her family still lived in Grimsby. While Maxine and Huntley were kept separate, authorities began searching their home and Soham Village College, where he worked as a caretaker. Huntley's house had clearly been properly cleaned recently. Despite this, investigators were able to recover many items of major importance. Soham Village College made one of the most significant findings. The Manchester United jerseys the girls were last seen wearing were discovered cut and burned in a college dumpster. The fibers from these shirts were positively identified as belonging to Huntley, his clothing, and his home. Furthermore, his fingerprints were discovered in the garbage bin. Huntley's car was examined on the same day he and Maxine were questioned. Despite being completely cleaned, there was debris of brick dust, chalk, and concrete on the tires and around the pedals. These same materials made up the road that led to where the girls had been dumped. A rear seat cover was missing, and the trunk lining had recently been replaced with a length of carpet from Huntley's house. The discovery of the burned garments at Soham Village College prompted investigators to make an arrest. Maxine Carr and Ian Huntley were both arrested at 4:30 a.m. on August 17th on charges of abduction and murder. Huntley, on the other hand, had plans to appear to be mentally ill. During his interrogation, he appeared disoriented and disconnected, even drooling at points. Authorities were forced to send him for a psychological examination. Maxine, who was facing serious accusations, made the swift decision to tell the officers the truth. She admitted lying about where she was on August 4th. She explained that this was due to a frantic phone call from Huntley. Huntley called Maxine while she was in Grimsby around 2 days after the girls went missing and informed her the following. Jessica and Holly went into Huntley's house since Holly had a nosebleed. Jessica sat on their bed as Huntley helped Holly stop the bleeding, and once she was all right, the girls left. Huntley was afraid of being wrongfully implicated in their murder, therefore he needed Maxine to provide him with an alibi. As Maxine told her story, she was shown the proof that Huntley was responsible for killing Holly and Jessica. "No, he couldn't have been. It couldn't have been. She said he hasn't done it." After this, Maxine said she still thought Huntley was innocent for a while. The detective had enough proof by August 20th to charge Ian Huntley with 2 counts of murder. Huntley was being watched at Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire when these charges were brought against him. On the same day, Maxine was charged with trying to pervert the course of justice. Maxine often wrote to Huntley while she was in Holloway prison to ask how he was doing and to tell him she loved him. Maxine didn't talk to Huntley again after December 2002. Huntley stayed at Rampton Secure Hospital for the next 7 weeks or so. Chris Clark, a consultant forensic psychiatrist, evaluated Huntley and had to decide if he was mentally fit to stand trial. Chris was sure of 2 things by the beginning of October. Huntley showed signs of being psychopathic, but he did not suffer from any major mental or psychotic illness that would prevent him from standing trial. He tried to kill himself on June 9, 2003, while he was waiting to go to court by hiding antidepressants in his cell. At first, people really thought he might die, but 2 days later, Huntley was back in his cell. Huntley pleaded not guilty to the murder charges at his preliminary hearing on June 16th, but he did plead guilty to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Maxine pleaded not guilty to her charges of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and assisting an offender. On November 5, 2003, Ian Huntley's trial began at the Old Bailey. Mr. Justice Alan Moses oversaw the case. Huntley's not guilty plea to 2 counts of murder was not changed. The Crown prosecutor was Richard Latham, and in his opening speech, he talked about what they thought happened to the girls on August 4th. By chance, they walked by Huntley's house while Maxine was not there. At 6:37 p.m., he decided to lure them inside intentionally. As soon as the door behind them shut, both girls were killed. Richard Latham used mobile data and reports from witnesses to show the court that Maxine had been in Grimsby that night. He said that because of how badly the bodies were decomposed, the doctor couldn't say for sure what killed either girl or whether they had been abused. Neither Jessica nor Holly showed signs of having been stabbed, drugged, or had a neck injury that would be caused by compression, like being strangled. They were likely suffocated. The prosecution made its case over the course of 3 days. Huntley tried hard to get rid of all the physical evidence that linked him to the crime, but he failed. Forensic evidence showed that Holly and Jessica were killed in Huntley's house and then taken to that ditch in Suffolk less than 12 hours after they died. Fibre from Huntley's vehicle, clothes and carpets inside his home matched those found on the girls' clothes, which were discovered incinerated in a garbage bin at Huntley's workplace with his fingerprints on them. The prosecution had a strong case, but Huntley's defense took a different approach. Huntley acknowledged that both girls died at his house that day, but claimed it was an accident. On December 1st, he testified in his defense and was questioned by his defense counsel, Stephen Coward. In response to Stephen's questions, Huntley stated that Holly and Jessica had come into his home to manage a nosebleed Holly suffered on the way home. He stumbled and fell while helping Holly in the bathroom, pushing her into the already run water. After Holly drowned, Huntley panicked and froze. Jessica apparently began shouting after witnessing this, accusing Huntley of pushing Holly into the bath. Huntley claims he accidentally suffocated Jessica while trying to stop her screaming. He said that he didn't save Holly from drowning, since his priority had been to get Jessica to stop screaming. Huntley claimed he woke on his landing near Jessica's body as his next memory. Naturally, Huntley was questioned about not contacting 999 to get help for the girls if everything had been an accident. He stated that he was worried about whether the police or the general public would believe what had happened, which is why he tried to conceal their presence in his house. He sobbed on the stand Huntley confessed responsibility for their deaths, but insisted it was all an accident. He further stated that his behavior during questioning was not a result of him pretending to be mentally ill, but rather a reaction to the trauma of what he had done. Maxine Carr's turn to testify for her own defense came on December 3rd. She gave a brief explanation of her connection with Huntley and their future plans. Her defense counsel, Michael Hubbard, then focused his inquiries on the days following the girls' deaths. Maxine reported that when she returned home on August 6th, she saw that Huntley had recently washed all their bedding and cleaned other areas of the house. Her first thought was that he was covering for a woman who had been in the house. Maxine also spotted a crack in the enamel bathtub that hadn't been present before her 4-day trip to Grimsby. When Michael Hubbard inquired why Maxine helped with the extreme cleaning, she said she was obsessive about tidiness. The discussion then shifted to why Maxine had agreed to the fake alibi. She claimed Huntley had constantly told her that he was not responsible for anything that happened to the girls and that he was afraid of being set up or having the crime blamed on him if the police discovered a 1998 abuse allegation made against him in Grimsby. Maxine explained that she spoke in the past tense about Holly because she had previously worked with the girls. Maxine claimed she urged Huntley several times to come clean to the detectives and tell them what had happened with Holly's nosebleed and the girls coming into the house. He thought up many reasons why he couldn't do it. Maxine concluded by saying that she would never have provided a fake alibi if she thought Huntley was guilty. I would have been horrified if I had known or suspected he had murdered either of those girls. Both the defense and the prosecution made their closing arguments on December 10th. Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr were described by Richard Latham as accomplished liars. He outlined it once more. They presented their case against Huntley, highlighting all of the forensic and circumstantial evidence they had discovered. We invite you to reject the accounts of both deaths being accidental as desperate lies. They were the only way out for him. Whatever he initiated clearly went wrong, Richard continued. As a result, both girls had to die, in this cruel man's mind, for his own selfish self-interest. After the defense had finished their final speech, Michael Coward was given the opportunity to speak. He contended that even if Huntley was responsible for the deaths of the girls, the prosecution was unable to demonstrate that he had done so on purpose. Therefore, the lesser accusation of manslaughter should be brought against Ian Huntley rather than murder. The jury deliberated for a total of 4 days before reaching their decisions regarding both Huntley and Maxine. On December 17, 2003, they came back with a judgment that was supported by the majority. Since Ian Huntley was found guilty on 2 separate charges of murder, he was given a sentence of life in prison. After that, a judge in the High Court named Mr. Justice Moses concluded that Huntley should serve a minimum of 40 years in prison. Therefore, the minimum sentence was subsequently issued. Before parole can even be considered for him, he will have to wait until he is 68 years old, and Justice Moses made it very clear that this judgment offers little or no hope of the defendant's eventual release. Maxine Carr entered a plea of guilty for perverting the course of justice, but not guilty to the charge of assisting an offender. The jury was convinced by her claims that the sole reason she protected Huntley was because she really thought that he was innocent. Maxine received a sentence of 3.5 years in prison. After Huntley was found guilty, Leslie Chapman gave a statement to the press who were outside. "I think he was a time bomb waiting to go off, and both of our girls were in the wrong place at the wrong time." He added, "I pray that the next time I see him, it will be like we saw our daughters, and that is in a coffin, Following the conviction, Huntley made a statement to the media regarding his sentencing from prison. He said, "I'm going to rot inside this place. I'll rot in here, I know it. I'll spend the rest of my life here. I'm going to be inside forever, and it'll be torture." The first few months of Huntley's imprisonment were not the easiest for him. Because his crime was so publicized, it was challenging for him to keep the fact that he was responsible for the deaths of 2 young girls a secret from the other inmates. Even the most violent offenders frown upon this in prison. On September 14, 2005, Mark Hobson, who had previously murdered 4 people, scolded Huntley with boiling water while they were both imprisoned in Wakefield. Following the incident, Huntley claimed that the prison authorities had failed to protect him and attempted to claim £15,000. Ian Huntley attempted suicide with antidepressants on September 5, 2006, as he had in 2003. He was hospitalized as a result of this, and his cell was thoroughly searched. It was then that the prison guards discovered a cassette tape with some intriguing information. Clearly, Huntley intended for this to be his last message to the world after his passing. In the message, Huntley claimed he confessed to Maxine Carr that he murdered the girls prior to their arrests. According to Huntley, Maxine then hit him across the face and told him to get himself together. She stated that she could not lose the teaching position for which she had worked so hard for. Huntley continued by stating that Maxine had instructed him to torch the bodies and destroy all forensic evidence linking him to the crime. In a strange turn of events, it is believed that Huntley made a deal with a fellow prisoner in which he would record a confession recording for the other man to sell to the media in exchange for antidepressants. Huntley was moved to Franklin Jail in January 2008 from Wakefield. 2 years later, in March of 2010, Huntley was attacked once more. Damien Folks, the armed robber, this time cut Huntley's throat. Huntley attempted to file a claim for compensation once more, this time asking for £20,000 because his injuries required hospitalization. On May 14, 2004, Maxine Carr was given a probationary release. She had been locked up for a total of 21 months. Maxine was given a false name to protect her from the public after her conviction and association with Huntley made her a target for assassination attempts. She was one of just 4 formerly imprisoned people in the UK to receive a new identity upon release. Maxine was awarded permanent anonymity, guaranteeing her privacy in February 2005. Since the crime, many people have speculated that Maxine was involved. Others doubt her story and believe she knew Huntley was guilty all along. It's highly unlikely that we'll ever learn the whole story. When everything was said and done, and Huntley was finally behind bars, Holly and Jessica's families had to adjust to their new normal. Holly's parents, Kevin and Nicola, later expressed their battle to be among the 5% of married couples who stay together after their child's murder. For the first 5 months after Holly died, we broke down together, but after that, we processed our grief at different speeds, Kevin explained to the Evening Standard. It was almost 2 years before we found each other again, he went on. But grief gives you a different sense of the passage of time, and it slipped by unnoticed. Oliver, Holly's brother, grew up, married Lydia, and began a family of his own. Oliver has made a point to tell his 2 children about their Aunt Holly in order to keep her memory alive. Sharon Chapman, who had previously worked at Jessica's school, returned to work in the years that followed. Leslie Chapman was set to start his new job as an engineer on August 5th, the day after he last saw his daughter. He started this job months later. Sharon and Leslie have kept their mourning largely private. That concludes our first case. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think Ian will ever be released from prison or Maxine's identity will ever be exposed? Share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. This brings us on to our next British juvenile case, the disturbing case of Milly Dowler. When a 13-year-old schoolgirl appears to vanish into thin air on her way home, an extensive search is undertaken to return her home safely. Years would pass, and investigators would be no closer to identifying the offender. That is, until a seemingly unconnected crime ripped open the case and a serial killer was exposed. Walton-upon-Thames is a village in northwest Surrey, England, approximately 20 kilometres outside of London. As its name suggests, the town is situated along the Thames River. This idyllic riverside setting appeared to be an ideal place to raise a family due to its wealth of amenities. Amanda Jane Dowler, better known as Milly, was born on June 25, 1988, to parents Bob and Sally Dowler in Walton-on-Thames. Together with her older sister, she grew up in Walton-on-Thames. Milly and Gemma had a close friendship and enjoyed spending time together. In the weeks leading up to the March 2002 incident, the pair had been holding sleepovers in the same room so they could stay up late talking and snacking on stored candies. Gemma described her sister as a vibrant girl with a sparkle in her eye. Milly's friends agreed, describing her as generous and caring. She was the type of person who wanted to make others happy. Milly was also a talented saxophonist. She was a natural extrovert and people-pleaser. Milly was the type of young girl who could talk your ear off and was the sunshine of her family's lives. As is so often the case, the day began like any other. On March 21, 2002, it was a Thursday. Milly, 13, spent the day at Heathside School in Weybridge. Milly and her friend Danielle planned to walk to the train station from school after an ordinary day of learning. The two were in desperate need of a long overdue catch-up. At 3:05 p.m., they left Heathside School and headed to the station. Milly was her usual energetic and joyful self, according to Danielle. They boarded the train and made their way to Danielle's stop in Walton-on-Thames. Milly typically got off at Hersham, which was the next stop, but the girls decided to dine at the station cafe so they could keep conversing. It would be simple for Milly to walk home. She was relieved to have more time to talk to Danielle. The girls talked about anything and everything over a hot plate of chips. Milly knew her father, who was working from home, would be expecting her home, so she did the sensible thing and planned to contact him. Her and Danielle's phones were both out of credit, but she was able to borrow one from a group of schoolchildren who were also present at the cafe. Milly called her father and informed him where she was and when she would be home. Danielle and Milly parted ways just after 4 p.m. when Danielle's sister arrived to accompany her home. Danielle asked Milly if she was okay, since she was going to walk back by herself. Milly laughed and said, "Of course." The weather was still nice, and Milly knew her way around. She had grown up in the area, so it was easy for her to get home. Milly was sure she would get home in time for dinner, just like she told her dad she would. She left the station cafe and walked down Station Avenue. At 4:08 p.m., one of Gemma's friends who was at the bus stop saw her. That same witness said she couldn't see Milly once she got on board less than a minute later. She didn't think this was very strange. She thought she might have just been walking down one of the side streets, but she did notice it. Gemma got home at 5 p.m. and saw that her sister wasn't there yet. She asked her dad where Milly was. He told her that he thought Gemma would meet her along the way. With that, they both felt sick to their stomachs immediately. Milly usually gets home on time, so being late was very strange for her. If she was going to be even 30 minutes late, she always told someone. When Milly still wasn't home at 7 p.m., her dad called the police. Thank goodness they picked up the case right away. The people of Walton-on-Thames knew they needed to keep an eye out for Milly as soon as she was reported missing. A lot of police were sent out to search the nearby fields, while helicopters flew around looking for Milly. Just 2 years ago, Sarah Payne was killed in Sussex. Sarah was taken from Kingston Gorse in West Sussex, which is about 50 miles away from Walton-on-Thames. However, her story was still fresh in people's minds. Detectives who were working on Sarah's case were called in to help with Milly's. If they moved quickly enough, they might be able to find Milly alive. 2 days after Milly went missing on March 23rd, Bob and Sally put out an appeal for help in finding their daughter. When her story made the news, people all over the UK knew about it. The media played a big role in getting Milly's face out there and telling as many people as possible about her. But this positive side of the media would soon change. A week after Milly went missing, the BBC's Crime Watch presented a reconstruction of her last known movements. Her parents also did an interview, pleading with viewers to come forward with any information they may have. The reconstruction was put together with the hope that people driving down the route that Milly took that day may have seen something that could assist in the police investigation. Over 4,000 people called the police in the first 2 weeks to offer possible leads in the inquiry. Reports of seeing Milly, the missing child, came in from all over the country and even Fiji. The current priority was sorting through the calls and determining which ones required immediate attention, which ones were irrelevant, and which ones could be followed up on later. The police questioned Gemma's friend, who had last seen Milly, to make sure she wasn't forgetting anything from that day. She hadn't. Milly was there 1 second and gone the next. The Surrey police were having a hard time making sense of this. How could she disappear in broad daylight in an area that should have had several witnesses to any kind of incident? Months passed, with no significant leads as to what had happened to Milly or where she was, despite taking hundreds of statements and performing endless house-to-house inquiries. By June, the Dowlers were contacted by investigators from the Surrey Police Department, who warned them to brace themselves for the worst. What they meant was that the likelihood of finding Milly alive was very low. Bob and Sally kept sending their daughter text messages in the desperate hope that she was still alive and well. The son offered £100,000 reward during the same month. Despite the offer of a reward, no one stepped forward with any useful tips. Everyone's worst nightmare was confirmed on September 18, 2002. A couple was searching for mushrooms in Yateley Heath Woods when they came across human remains. They rushed back to their car and called the authorities to inform them of their discovery. They even mentioned that they thought they had discovered Milly Dowler, demonstrating how widespread Milly's case was at the time. Before the body was taken for a post-mortem examination, investigators hurried to the scene and began gathering evidence and crime scene images. They had to wait because of the extent of the decomposition before making a definitive identification. 24 hours later, it was verified by dental records that the body of Milly Dowler had been found. There were no items or clothing at the scene. Milly's school outfit, backpack, and cell phone weren't with her body. In fact, 21 years later, these items still haven't been retrieved. Even though officials were dreading the worst, Milly's case had still been designated as an endangered missing person. Now, after her remains were found, it was evident they were dealing with a homicide case. Experts were sent in to attempt to determine how long Milly's remains had been in that region of Yateley Heath Woods. Using the natural development of plants around her, they calculated that her body had likely been in this position since the week of her abduction. When detectives were searching the Dowler home in the early stages of the investigation, they found a few notes and poems written by Milly in the months prior to her murder. Some of them mentioned occasional disagreements with her dad. Now, you can hardly call this exceptional for a teenage girl. What youngsters don't have conflicts with their parents from time to time? Milly also voiced thoughts of inadequacy, stating her sister Gemma was prettier and smarter than her. Again, this sounds like something many siblings go through growing up, especially at Milly's age. The Dowlers were forced to deal with the media's relentless scrutiny, frantically seeking a story to splash on the front page. Photographers stalked them, even hiding in their garden and photographing them during their most terrible period. Even the Dowlers admitted that was nothing in comparison to what a specific news organization did. This incident was made public in 2011 after it was revealed that writers from the British daily newspaper News of the World had intercepted and destroyed Milly Dowler's voicemail messages on her mobile phone. While Milly Dowler was still missing, journalists hacked into her voicemail in order to obtain exclusive stories and possible information about her whereabouts. When Milly's voicemail messages were accessed and deleted, her parents thought she was still alive, since she was accessing and deleting her messages herself. When this information became known, there was a significant public backlash against the media. It resulted in the closure of the News of the World newspaper. Extensive investigations, inquiries, and legal processes ensued, revealing widespread unlawful phone hacking and unethical journalistic practices in the British media sector. For the first 20 months after her disappearance and murder, all avenues of inquiry and pursuit of leads yielded nothing concrete. That is, until the Met Police in London called Surrey Police. DCI Sutton, an officer who had transferred from Surrey Police to the Met Police, was investigating a series of attacks on 3 women, some of which resulted in murder. He claimed that they had their sights set on someone, and he saw something while looking at this man. He had formerly resided at 24 Collingwood Place in Walton-on-Thames. This apartment's front door was less than 100 yards from where Milly vanished. One of the senior investigating officers from Surrey Police answered this call. He recalls hearing this information, which made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Is this just a coincidence? Was this Milly Dowler's killer? Levi Belfield was the suspect in the string of London attacks. Levi Rabbits was born in Isleworth, London, on May 17, 1968, to parents Jean and Joseph Rabbits. It is unclear when his surname was changed from Rabbits to Belfield, but we do know that Belfield took his mother's maiden name. Belfield's father died when Levi was a child as a result of leukemia. He grew up on a council estate in southwest London with his 4 siblings and attended Crane Junior School. Belfield was in his early teens when he was convicted of breaking into a house and stealing numerous items in 1981. Following that, in 1990, Belfield got into a violent conflict with a police officer, which resulted in a second charge. Although he had multiple offences and convictions on his record, none of them were as serious as the charges that would subsequently be made against him. Belfield has 11 children from 5 different relationships. His ex-girlfriends later described him as charming at first, before revealing the genuine person beneath the surface. He was dictatorial and violent, and he intimidated them with his enormous frame. All the women have comparable experiences with Belfield as a partner. Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton handled later cases involving Belfield, who remarked, "When we started dealing with him, he came across as very jokey, like he's your best mate, but he's a cunning and violent individual. He can change from being friendly to being nasty in an instant." On February 4, 2003, Marcia McDonnell, then 19 years old, got off the 111 bus at the Percy Road bus stop and headed for her Hampton home. The bus left after the skilled violinist and netball player had seen a movie with friends. It was said of Marcia that she was quiet and hard-working. Before attending college, she was taking a gap year to see the world. Her sights were set on Australia. Marcia was suddenly and unprovokedly assaulted in the back of the head with a blunt instrument when she was only yards from her front door. Marcia was discovered by a witness bleeding to death. An ambulance was called to take her to the hospital immediately. 2 days later, Marcia tragically passed away. The following year, on May 28th, Kate Sheedy, then 18, was involved in yet another tragic incident. Kate was the head girl of her senior class at Gumley House Covent School. She was leaving on that day to begin her study leave for her A-level exams. Kate went out to a karaoke bar with her friends. After that, she boarded the H22 bus to return to Isleworth, London. Kate saw a curiously parked car on her way home and decided to investigate. It seemed strange to her that the engine was running but the lights were out. To avoid the vehicle, Kate opted to cross the road. As she was crossing the street, the car sped towards her, hitting Kate. Shockingly, the driver didn't stop there and reversed over Kate's body before speeding away. Amazingly, Kate was able to pull herself off the road and get help. When she finally got to the hospital, the full extent of her wounds became apparent. Her ribs were crushed, her collarbone was broken, her liver was split in half, and her lower back was broken. Her lungs were collapsed, and one had been pierced. Kate was on the verge of death. Speaking with the Telegraph, she recalled, "I remember in the 3rd week I was in hospital, I woke up and I cried. For days I couldn't stop sobbing at the realization that someone had tried to take my life." Tragically, just 3 months later, another young woman was brutally attacked. Amélie Delagrange relocated to the United Kingdom from a small village in France in order to improve her English. Dominique and Jean-François, her parents, described their daughter as always cheerful and smiling. She earned her bachelor's degree in France before moving to Spain. Amélie originally travelled to England and resided in Manchester before relocating to London in April 2004. Amélie was studying applied languages while working at a bakery in Richmond. She met her then-boyfriend, Olivier L'Enfant. He was also French-born, living in London. The first thing that drew Olivier to Amélie was her smile, which he later recalled. Amélie was a reserved young lady. She was hesitant to walk anywhere, especially late at night. Amélie caught up with friends at Crystal's Wine Bar in Twickenham on August 19, 2004. She invited Olivier out, but he was too busy packing up his house for a move. They exchanged their goodbyes, and Olivier promised to see her the next day. Amélie was spotted on CCTV boarding a 267 bus in Twickenham just after 9:30 p.m. Amélie, through an unfortunate twist of fate, missed her stop. She got off at Fulwell Bus Garage and began her walk home in the dark. Amélie was last seen alive around 10 p.m. She was discovered unconscious 30 minutes later with a blunt force trauma to the head. The pool of blood that surrounded her suggested the attack on Amélie had been violent. She was taken to West Middlesex Hospital in an ambulance. She was confirmed dead shortly after midnight. Following Amélie's attack and death, investigators received numerous names from locals of violent men who may have done something like this. Levi Belfield was one of those names. He was questioned, and the investigators who conducted the interview thought Levi was a real lad. He didn't seem to take the whole affair seriously and remained upbeat throughout. Kate Sheedy survived the attempted murder and was able to provide authorities with a comprehensive description of the car that hit her. This happened to be the same car that Belfield was driving at the time. According to CCTV evidence from the night of her attack, this car travelled behind Kate's bus before stopping after she got off and launching the attack. The CCTV footage from Amelie and Marsha's instances was then examined by investigators. A car could be seen following the buses once more. Both of these vehicles had the potential to be related to Belfield. By the end of 2004, detectives felt they had gathered enough evidence to charge Belfield. On November 22nd, he was arrested on suspicion of Amélie Delagrange's murder. 3 days later, he was charged with 3 counts of abuse, and on December 9th, he was charged with assault. Belfield remained imprisoned pending his trial. He was charged with Amélie's murder in early 2006. In addition, Belfield was charged with the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy and the attempted murder of an Albanian woman, Irma Dragoshi, who, like Marsha and Amélie, had been beaten over the head with a blunt instrument after getting off the bus. In May of that same year, he was also charged with the murder of Marsha McDonnell. Belfield was questioned about Milly's case in July 2005. He was openly asked if he was involved. Each question received a no-comment response from Belfield. The authorities didn't have any proof linking Belfield to Milly's murder at this point. Just because he lived nearby didn't mean he was the one to blame. To find the link, more research was required. The detectives concentrated on chatting with ex-girlfriends to see if they might learn anything relevant. Belfield was dating Emma Mills when Milly was abducted. Emma confirmed the couple resided with their children in her Collingwood Place flat. She claimed that when Milly went missing, they were house-sitting somewhere else, leaving their flat empty. On March 21st, Emma stated that she couldn't confirm Belfield's whereabouts. He got back to her later that evening. Emma seemed to think Belfield was dressed differently than he was when she saw him leave in the morning. The duo went to bed together, but Belfield awoke between 3 and 4 a.m. and returned to their flat. Emma then told the detectives something that grabbed their attention. Belfield unexpectedly moved them from their Collingwood Place flat on March 22nd, the day after Milly vanished. They still had 2 months on their lease, so she couldn't understand why they had to move so quickly. He insisted on them returning to a prior residence, even though the flat was in ruins. It was unfit for children, but given the type of partner Belfield was, Emma couldn't do much to stop the move and had to accept it. Levi Belfield was charged with the murders of Marsha and Amélie, as well as the attempted murders of Irma Dragoshi and Kate Sheedy, and the kidnapping of another lady. On October 12, 2007, the trial commenced at the Old Bailey in London. Belfield pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. Prosecutor Brian Altman stated during the trial, "These women were targeted victims of a predatory man who stalked bus stops and bus routes in vehicles looking for young women to attack." Sunil Garu was taken to the stand as a witness, and he had quite a story to tell. Sunil, a Belfield associate, had been in the car with him on the day he attacked Irma. "Watch this," Belfield told him before leaping from his car and smashing a blunt object against the back of Irma's skull. Belfield, predictably, tried to blame Sunil, alleging he was the one who attacked Irma. Even though Irma correctly identified Belfield in a photo lineup, a further fact revealed during the trial was Belfield's suicide attempt 6 days after Amélie was murdered. He had collapsed in his bedroom and overdosed on antidepressants. A friend discovered him. According to this person, Belfield then said, "You don't know what I have done." He was admitted to a mental hospital but was released the next day. The trial was finally over on the 25th of February 2008. A verdict of guilty was reached for Levi Belfield in the cases of the homicides of Amélie Delagrange and Marsha McDonnell. as well as the attempted homicide of Kate Sheedy. The other 2 counts were dropped because there was insufficient evidence to support them. As a result of his conviction, Levi Belfield's name was brought to public attention as a primary suspect in the kidnapping and murder of Milly Dowler. Using CCTV images of a red Daewoo Nexia traveling down the road at the time Milly was last seen, investigators linked him to Milly's case. This car belonged to Emma Mills, who was in a relationship with Belfield at the time and lived not far from where Milly was kidnapped. The Daily Mirror contacted Levi Belfield for comment in 2009. "There aren't many red Daewoos in Walton-on-Thames," he remarked. "So, we have to be realistic, but I also have to be careful about how I answer these questions. I did use the Daewoo once, and I was pulled over for speeding in it." We'll never know why he believed this was a good statement to the media. The car, along with other belongings like Milly's clothes, phone and rucksack, have never been found. Levi Belfield was charged with Milly Dowler's kidnapping and murder in March 2010, following an additional investigation. His trial started on May 10, 2011. The court was presided over by Mr. Justice Wilkie. This is an excerpt from the prosecutor's brief. "On this day, an entirely innocent and quite ordinary diversion to a station cafe to buy some chips with some school friends was to cost Milly her life because it meant taking a fateful journey along Station Avenue." The trial went on for another 6 weeks until a verdict was reached. Levi Belfield was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison on June 23, 2011. He claimed to be innocent for several years before finally revealing what he had done. Milly's experience at the hands of this monster was extremely terrifying. Levi Belfield recounted what he did to Milly in January 2016, admitting responsibility for her. Belfield insisted on speaking with female officers when he gave his statement to officers. The Dowler family issued the following statement on February 10th. "A word of caution. What you are about to hear is vivid and disturbing. We feel compelled to add to the information that has already been made public because we do not believe what has been revealed reflects the true heinousness of this man," the statement said. In May 2015, nearly 9 months ago, we were informed that Belfield had requested to speak to Surrey Police about Milly. Belfield made it clear to the police that he would only speak to female officers. Belfield provided the officers with a harrowing account of Milly's last 14 hours, giving details of her abduction, abuse, torture, and then finally how he killed her. Belfield told the police that after kidnapping Milly and assaulting her at his flat a few meters from Walton Station, he then drove her to his mum's house. He reversed down a driveway and then assaulted her in broad daylight over the trunk of his car. Belfield then moved her to another location where the abuse and torture continued for several hours. It wasn't until the next day that he finally strangled her to death. The statement ended, "We believe that they should know what Belfield did to our beautiful daughter and sister, Milly." One of the many cases that will leave a lasting impact on British history is that of Amanda Jane Dowler, who was abducted and murdered. There may be connections between Levi Belfield and other cases, including several homicides. He has not been convicted of any further crimes, as the evidence against him is still insufficient. What did you think of the cases we covered today? Share your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled for the next mystery to unfold.